Hello and welcome to Cultural Wealth Wednesdays. I'm thrilled you joined us today for what I believe will be a transformative conversation about recognizing, honoring, and leveraging the incredible assets that exist within our diverse communities. I'm Dr. Crystal L. Clemens, founder and CEO of Our Village Consulting, and I've dedicated over 15 years of my career to a simple but powerful belief. Every student, every family, and every community possesses incredible wealth that, when recognized and cultivated, can transform educational outcomes. As someone who has spent my career in school counseling and counselor education, I've witnessed firsthand how traditional deficit-based thinking can limit our vision of what's possible. But I've also seen the magic that happens when we shift our perspective to recognize the cultural wealth that surrounds us every day. Cultural Wealth Wednesdays is our weekly space to explore, celebrate, and learn how to leverage the diverse forms of capital that exist in our communities, what researcher Tara Yasso calls community cultural wealth. We're talking about the aspirational capital that drives families to dream big for their children, the linguistic capital found in multilingual households, the familial capital that creates strong support networks, the social capital built through community connections, the navigational capital that helps families persist through challenges, and the resistant capital that emerges from communities advocating for change. Each Wednesday, we'll dive deep into practical strategies for identifying cultural wealth in your school or community, building authentic partnerships that honor diverse perspectives, creating programming that builds on existing community assets, challenging systems that perpetuate deficit thinking, and developing your own cultural competence as an educator or leader. Cultural Wealth Wednesdays isn't just about changing how we think. It's about changing how we act. It's about building the kind of inclusive, asset-based educational communities where every child can thrive. So let's begin this journey together. Let's challenge ourselves to see wealth where others might see deficits. Let's build bridges where others might see barriers. Let's create the villages our children deserve. Greetings and welcome to our very first Cultural Wealth Wednesday. I'm excited to begin this journey with all of you as we explore how cultural wealth transforms our approach to education, staff development, and leadership. Over the next few minutes or so, we'll unpack what cultural wealth really means and why it's essential for creating more equitable and effective learning environments. So let's start with the foundation. Cultural wealth is a concept developed by Dr. Tara Yasso that challenges traditional views of what we consider valuable knowledge and skills. Instead of focusing solely on what students and families might be lacking, cultural wealth instead recognizes the incredible assets that every individual brings to our educational community. Think of cultural wealth as 6 interconnected forms of capital that students, families, and staff all possess. First, let's start with aspirational capital. That's the hopes and dreams that fuel perseverance, even in the face of barriers. So think about the parent who is working 2 jobs and telling their child to pursue higher education or pursue post-secondary career, right? Or the student who dreams of being the first doctor in their family. Think about all of our first-gen students for us higher ed folks. Think about the first-gen students, right? That's aspirational capital. In the face of all the barriers, generations of folks had to have some sort of hope and dream that one day this might be their current situation, but their descendants won't have the same situation. Linguistic capital. That's the multilingual and communication skills developed through diverse language experiences. So we're not just talking about speaking multiple languages, but how are we navigating different communication styles and cultural contexts? That could be, yes, our students who come to us speaking Spanish, and that's their first language, or speaking Italian, or speaking Portuguese, or speaking French, or speaking Tagalog, right? Speaking any African dialect or any number of dialects across the board. There are thousands upon thousands of dialects. Let's also bring it home just a little bit. That means speaking Ebonics. That means speaking Patois. That means speaking in dialects and languages that might be a whole language to one cultural group that another cultural group may not understand. Yet it's all English, right? But it's still multilingual. That is linguistic capital. Familial capital. That's the knowledge and cultural intuition developed through family and community connections. That's when we're talking about the wisdom that's passed down through the generations and the strong kinship bonds that provide emotional and social support. And it's really important to note that when we talk about family, we're not just talking about biological family. We're talking about our chosen family too. When we think biological family, I know we're thinking mom, dad, siblings, maybe grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, that sort of thing. But family, so often, especially within minoritized and marginalized communities, family is who we choose. Family is our play auntie, our play uncle, our play cousins, who are usually like our best friends. Church family, that's family. If you're a member of a sorority or fraternity, that's your family too. After all, the word soror means sister in Greek. So family is not only who we're born with and what family we're born into, but also the family that we choose. Social capital, networks of people and community resources that provide so much support, whether it's emotional, it can be financial, mental support, whatever the support is, these social capital networks can help and provide that. These are the connections that help us navigate through different institutions and access opportunities. That's the next thing we're going to talk about, navigational capital. Navigational capital, skills and strategies needed to maneuver through institutions that are not necessarily created with minoritized and marginalized folks in mind. This is resilience. This is problem solving. This is what are we developing skill-wise by overcoming systemic barriers. Here's an example. I was a high school counselor for 3 years. And one of our jobs as high school counselors, as some of you may know, we're writing a lot of recommendations, especially when it comes to our kids wanting to go to college and so on and so forth. So you have kids, those first gens I was talking about earlier, who, because their families never went to college, they don't know exactly what to expect. They don't know the ins and outs, the tips and the tricks, and so on and so forth. Then they come to the counselor who's been to college and has a master's degree at least, right? And that counselor says, okay, well, if this is what you want to major in, these are the classes you should be looking at taking. Make sure you check in with your academic advisor. If they have other supports on the campus, make sure you're checking in with those folks. Go to office hours, things like this that they may not necessarily get from other folks, right? So as counselors, we're telling the kids that type of stuff. At least we should be, if you're doing it right. Last but not least, resistance capital. The knowledge and skills developed through opposition to inequities and subordination. This is not only the awareness of the social injustices that happen in our systems, but the motivation to work towards the positive change. Something I've said in the past, and I'll say it here again. If you are an educator, your resistance capital muscle should be very strong if you're doing it right. If you're doing the work of an educator the way you should be doing it, that should be a very strong muscle that we're building up, because we're seeing the inequities and the gaps and all of these things in the system. We're seeing how special education is overrun with students of color, yet giftedness education is not. Why is that? We're seeing the discipline rates, and we're wondering why that is. And we're actually taking steps to rectify the situation. That is resistance capital. So let's talk about what cultural wealth looks like in education. When we recognize cultural wealth, it has the ability to transform how we see our students and their families. Western education has us looking at non-white kids and their families and folks with differences, not just non-white folks, but folks with differences, folks who may have a lower socioeconomic status or whatever the case may be. We look at them in terms of what do they need? How can I help them? We look at them with the deficit in mind. But when we look at these students and families, all students and all families, from a lens of strength and what their strengths are, we'll see them differently. We'll see them as assets that enrich our learning community. So again, for example, let's talk about linguistic capital again for a minute. When a student code switches between languages or dialects, we recognize it as linguistic capital rather than demonizing them for not speaking the King's English. When we demonize them for not speaking the King's English, we are now viewing their linguistic capital as a problem that needs correction instead of the strength that it is. When families share these different perspectives based on their educational background, based on their own cultural backgrounds, we're tapping into the familial capital rather than dismissing their input. Again, a lot of times in education, we wonder why we're trying to reach certain families from certain cultural backgrounds and why our outreach really isn't going anywhere. Well, when you don't invite them in, when you don't invite them to have a seat at the table and a voice that you actually listen to and implement their own thoughts, beliefs, right? When you see them as an issue when they come up to the school, why would they want to come to your school if you're not taking them, their culture, their background into consideration with every decision you make? This shift in perspective, it directly impacts our student outcomes. The research shows that when educators and education systems, when we view our students through a lens of strength and asset, rather than through a lens of deficit and lack, achievement increases, academic achievement increases, engagement increases, not just student engagement within the classroom, but family and community engagement within the school, right? See, the achievement gap starts to close when we view our students and their families through a lens of strengths and assets, not a lens of deficit and lack. Because see, now they feel valued. Students and families alike feel valued. They feel supported. They feel heard. They feel seen, right? And they feel free to be who they are, not having to conform to the system to be successful. Cultural wealth, it also helps us to understand that intelligence and capability come in many, many, many forms. I talked about it earlier, how the special education rates and the gifted education rates are really different when it comes to our students of color. Truth is, we don't see their cultural wealth and how it plays out in their ability, their capabilities, and their intelligence. The student who can translate for their families at parent-teacher conferences, that's sophisticated, not only linguistic capital, but that's also navigational capital, because now the student is helping the family navigate through the system that is the school. That young person who helps to run the family business while also maintaining good grades, that's social and familial capital. They're learning so much. When we take our students and their families, their cultural backgrounds, when we take all of that into consideration, that opens up our minds to their possibilities. Cultural wealth and leadership. Let's see, leadership through a cultural wealth framework means we're creating the systems and the cultures that value and leverage the diverse assets within the community. It's about making the decisions that honor the ways of knowing and being while maintaining high standards for everyone. A lot of times we talk about school culture and climate. How often does school culture and climate take cultural wealth of all involved into consideration? Cultural wealth informed leaders understand that equity is not just about treating everyone the same. It's about recognizing what each person brings and ensuring that everyone has what they need to succeed. These leaders actively seek out diverse perspectives, and they're creating inclusive spaces, creating inclusive decision-making processes, and building these systems that are supporting cultural assets and not suppressing cultural assets. This type of leadership style also means you're willing to examine and change practices that may inadvertently marginalize certain groups while celebrating and incorporating the strengths that all community members contribute. This approach to professional development and professional learning. It moves beyond those one-size-fits-all cookie-cutter training models. Instead, it provides support and provides space for educators and support staff to bring themselves into the educational space. It allows them to share their own cultural knowledge and learn from their colleagues and friends. And it also allows them to develop culturally sustainable and responsive practices that honor all students' backgrounds. When we are investing in understanding cultural wealth, we're not only building on our students and families, we're building on the staff and their ability to create inclusive classrooms where every student can thrive, because we've created an inclusive school where every educator can thrive. Now we're developing the educators who can recognize the brilliance in all of the forms, because their own brilliance has been recognized in all of its forms. And we're recognizing educators and we're developing educators who can understand that high expectations and cultural responsiveness go hand in hand. As we continue our Cultural Wealth Wednesdays, we'll dive deeper into each form of capital. We'll be exploring some practical applications, and we'll be sharing some strategies for implementing this framework in our daily work. Remember, this is not about adding more to your plate. It's not. What it is we're shifting our lens to see and build upon the incredible wealth that already exists in your schools and the communities. Thank you for joining me today, and I look forward to this ongoing conversation about how cultural wealth can transform our educational practices and create more equitable outcomes for all students.